On Monday, Nicola Willis, seen here being a little teapot short and stout, announced a change in direction for government sector employees that would see changes to work from home rules in an effort to revitalise the Wellington CBD. While work from home has been shown time and again to result in more productive staff, and Aotearoa New Zealand often comes out at the lower end of productivity reports, the government is sure this change will result in more productivity, once again showcasing that research and data are nice to haves, not need to haves, in the decision making process. Citing the pandemic response now being over, which includes the ending of free RATS tests from this Monday, it's not great. Willis completely forgot that work from home actually started in Wellington, being written into contracts and planned for by management in response to the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake. That or she just doesn't care. Both options are really possible. Right. Greenpeace activists this week occupied the office of seabed mining lobbyist Stratera, which drew praise from Green MP Steve Abel. Minister for putting porn on government credit cards, Shane Jones, seen here learning how New Zealand First supporters greeted each other outside Parliament in February of 2022, described the protesters as vermin. The Greenpeace protesters, not the ones who illegally occupied Parliament grounds, harassed locals, called for executions of public figures and burnt the playground down. In response, the ACT Party claimed if a right-wing group did the same, media would demand they resign. Unlike they did when ACT endorsed an alt-right fundraiser held by someone who said they wanted to blow up mosque after mosque, or when David Seymour joked about blowing up the Ministry of Pacific Peoples. On Tuesday, media reported that Tory Whānau and Angela O'Leary had appeared on some podcast. Oh, wait, I know that show. For some reason, Stuff focused their story on the car sale, and while the Herald and News Talk did include elements about discussions around mental health and the pressures of public life, they also mentioned Whānau had discussed breaking the law around Māori wards in a subheading which drove angry racist old white men crazy. Good thing they can all scream woke in the comment sections, or they'd be more frustrated than their wives on their anniversary night. To celebrate Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori this year, Education Minister Erica Stanford held off on announcing a $30 million cut in Te Reo language programs for teachers until the week after it finished. The funding will be used to fast-track resources for the new maths curriculum that is being rushed through without proper training for staff to fully get their heads around the changes, based on erroneous data using a single data set from test results that students weren't studying for or taught for. On Wednesday, ANZ CEO Antonia Watson, seen here with some English literature grad, backed calls for a capital gains tax, saying it was a fair form of income tax. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon tried sarcasm on for size in his response when he said, "I'd love that the CEO of a big bank in Australia wants to take more money off New Zealanders," making it sound like he thought the bank got the money from the tax, not the government. In completely unconnected news, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon this month sold one of his rental properties for just shy of $1 million, making $295,000 in untaxed capital gains. And reports this week show that for the first time in nearly 3 years, the majority of mortgages approved were for investment properties and not first home buyers. Associate Education Minister David Seymour, seeing here trying to dog whistle, this week announced an end to teacher-only days in schools. While there's a comedy trope of teacher-only days being a chance for teachers to get drunk and laugh at students, these days they're actually used for teachers to get drunk and laugh at Associate Education Minister David Seymour. Seriously, though, they're actually used for planning and upskilling days for staff, so they don't use up their own free time to maintain their professional standards, and they're not included in the number of days young people attend school. Truancy is one of the problems this government has focused on fixing by using their tried and failed method of ignoring advice around the actual drivers of problems, instead of saying all the wrong words to sound like they have a fix. Like in this week's press conference, when Minister David Seymour said, and I quote, "Some students are missing up to 10 days a week in lessons." In New York, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Winston Peters, seen here responding to David Seymour's request that he stop saying things like genocide is bad and Palestinian statehood needs to happen, today addressed the United Nations. At one stage, he told other world leaders to stop talking in the middle of his speech and is quoted as saying, "Growing distrust and division is making international cooperation more difficult," which sounds very statesmanlike until you remember which party was under 5% in the polls until they started riding a wave of conspiratorial distrust and division in our own institutions. And finally, meet the spookfish. It's a new type of ghost shark discovered on the ocean floor in the waters around the Chatham Islands. The scientific name Harriet Avia was given to it after the discoverer's grandmother. Ghost sharks live on a diet of crustaceans found on the seabed, accessing them with their long nose-like appendage, and actually have several different identities. They're also known as a chimera, a ratfish, rabbitfish, and elephantfish, which coincidentally are the nicknames I've given to some of the coalition backbench MPs. When asked if the government will look at giving the new shark protected status, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon declined, saying, "We don't do bottom feeding and just focus on the bottom." Oh, and don't forget that daylight saving time starts this weekend. Remember, if you still have an analog clock, to move it forward and to lose an hour's sleep. And if you don't have an analog clock, technology will do it all for you and you'll still lose an hour's sleep, but in a much more efficient way. Random fact for you, daylight saving time was actually instigated by New Zealand entomologist and astronomer George Hudson, so he could have more daylight hours to study bugs, for which he ended up cataloguing thousands of the species, and his collection is now housed in Te Papa. Here, the links to other things that come at the end of YouTube videos.